This man with tips for truckers here, and you need to know all these terms before you get into trucking, and you probably haven't heard of them. First one is shipper, customer, consignee. All those are either the places you're picking up from or delivering to. And there's a bunch of other terms, but those are the most common. Obviously, the shipper is the one you're picking up from. And usually the customer and always the consignee is the person receiving the delivery. Which brings me on to the second one, is the bill of lading, or BOL. Now what that means is basically a receipt that is saying you're carrying this, whatever you're carrying, and the customer has to sign it before it's, or it's not officially delivered. This is an example of a bill of lading right here. It'll have usually the address you're delivering to. It'll say what the product is, and usually it has a weight or piece count, and it'll always have a bill of lading number. So whenever you need a BOL number or a bill of lading number, it's that, and it's usually sent to you on your Qualcomm. But it's basically the receipt that says what you're picking up and what you're delivering. The shipper will give it to you, and then you give it to the customer, and always you have to have it signed. And that load's worth nothing until it's signed. Don't ever if you ever lose it, if you ever driving a load without bills or bill of lading, then technically you're not allowed to haul that load, because you need some documentation that says that you're hauling this load. Next up is a weigh station, scale house, coop, something like that. But anytime you see a sign that says weigh station, if it's ever open, you have to go through it, pay attention to the green or red lights or arrows, drive over the scale. Sometimes you got to drive over it, sometimes you got to stop, pay close attention to the signs. And they'll tell you if you're overweight or whatever. They're just checking your weight and checking out your equipment, making sure you don't have any lights out or anything like that. But if you ever see a weigh station that's open, you got to go through it unless your pre-pass gives you the green light. Next one, I just wanted to give you a handful of the different types of trailers so that you're familiar with it. Most common is a reefer, just short for refrigerated trailer. So you'll have produce or something that needs to be hauled at a certain temperature in those. But there's also what's called a dry van or a box, or it's most commonly called a van or a dry van. And what a dry van means is basically like a reefer that doesn't have the unit on it. It can haul a little bit more weight than a reefer can, and so there's an advantage there, but it's not temperature controlled. It's just a regular trailer. It just holds stuff, and it's got a roof and sides. Now the other ones, flatbed, obviously, like what I haul, you just set stuff on top of it and strap it down. You got tankers, self-explanatory. They haul either liquid or bulk material. Containers. Those are intermodal, or it's also called intermodal. They have these, those big shipping containers. They'll either set it from a railroad car onto a trailer or on a ship at a port. Earlier I mentioned bulk. Now what bulk means is, or containers. So if you're just hauling a bunch of flour, or if you're hauling a bunch of sand or something like that, that's called bulk. But if it's in different individual little bags, technically not bulk. Next is your dispatcher, fleet manager. I don't know what else they're calling them nowadays, but basically that's the person you call or you message on your Qualcomm that is telling you where to go and what to do. Driver manager is the other name for them, is what they're calling them nowadays, because I guess dispatcher is a little bit disrespectful, because they're wanting to make it seem a little bit more personal. Next we have deadhead and bobtail. So deadhead just means you're empty. You're hauling an empty trailer somewhere. That's all that deadhead means. And bobtail means you're not hauling a trailer at all. Fifth wheel and kingpin, that's basically where the trailer meets the tractor. So the fifth wheel's on the tractor, the kingpin is on the trailer, a little thing goes into the fifth wheel like that. I mean, this is the best I could describe it. But the fifth wheel's on the tractor and the kingpin's hanging down from the trailer. They couple. There's one you're going to grow to hate. That is a broker. And basically it's a middleman between your dispatcher and you and the place you're delivering to. So basically what a broker does is he will take certain loads that customers need hauled and says, okay, I'll find somebody to haul them. And he's basically just a middleman where this company's got excess loads. They don't want to deal with calling a bunch of different trucking companies and saying, I want, you to haul this to there or whatever. They just get the broker to do it, and the broker gets a pretty hefty commission. But what you're going to have to probably do most of the time is keep in touch with that broker. It's like having a second dispatcher, and it's going to be a pain. And a lot of times they're going to give you a lot of bad information, so be careful and write down everything they say. Kind of going with a broker, a lumper is a middleman that the customer doesn't have their own people to unload the truck. I don't understand why not. I think that should kind of be the rule. But a lumper is just a third-party person who unloads your truck, and then you have to pay, or your company has to pay. You usually get a com check, and it will take forever, and they charge whatever they want to charge instead of the facility you're delivering to actually having the people that should be unloading your truck. They have a third party there, and they could charge whatever they want most of the time. It's usually something ridiculous, and there's nothing you could do about it. But be aware of lumper charges, especially if you're pulling a reefer or a dry van. Flatbedders, we don't have to deal with that. The customer just unloads us. Speaking of flatbed, we use dunnage all the time, and a lot of different trucking sectors use it, but mostly flatbed. And what that means, it's something that holds the freight in place that's not part of the actual freight that you're delivering. So what it would be like some 4x4s, you set a steel coil on some 4x4s. That's the most common piece of dunnage. But it also could be different racks, or like if you're hauling countertops, you got these A-frames that the countertops set on each side. It's anything holding the freight in place that is not the freight, basically. And then I save the best and worst for last. That is E-log, hours of service, hours, anything along those lines. We used to have paper logs back in the day, and they look like this, and we would write down what all we did. And now it's just tracked electronically on a device. It's similar, most time it's similar to a GPS or something. It's a touchscreen computer, and it'll track when you're driving, and then you put in, when you're stopped, when you're loaded, when you're taking your 10-hour break. And that leads me into hours of service. So without going, I could talk about this for hours and hours, but basically you're only allowed to drive a certain amount of hours. You have to stop for a certain amount of hours. And whenever you hear hours of service, 70-hour, 10-hour, 14-hour, any of those, 11-hour, it's referring to the hours of service that you're limited to be able to drive and perform other activities driving the truck. Watch some other videos on that. It gets really complicated. But E-logs, like I said, basically, I'll show it to you. It's over here, and it says this is how much time you have for driving, this is how much time you have to your next break, this is how much time you've been stopped for. And they're going to be the bane of your existence. But that's what they are, and like I said, every truck has to have E-logs now and